you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials? Tell me I'm crazy.
Mulder, you're crazy.
I can't give up. Not as long as the truth is out there. I want to believe.
Welcome to this episode of the X-Files with your host Mark, and I'm joined by two other hosts tonight. First is Becky. Hi, Becky.
Hello.
Yeah, it's been a while since we did one of these, isn't it? But we're kind of raring to go because we're talking about JFK. And the other person on with us tonight is Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
He's back for more after Silence of the Lambs. Interestingly, this is the one we asked you to come on first, didn't we? I remember asking you if you wanted to come on to talk about JFK. But
yeah, well, we covered it on the podcast, but just not very well, really. And I was really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I remember on Chin Striker versus Punter, right? It kind of got a bit disrupted, and I always felt bad. And I was always interested in what you had to say about it because I know you really like this film. So I was kind of keen to have you on if you wanted to come on for JFK. And plus, you know, it's such an obvious sort of influence on the X-Files. It's I think Silence of the Lambs is like the top one, which is why we did it first. But JFK comes second. And just after that, I'd say probably All the President's Men in terms of movie influences. So,
yeah.
So JFK, made in 1991. I think I saw it at the cinema. I might be wrong, but I think I did. Oliver Stone. Tonight we're going to be talking about the director's cut, which I think is about 20 minutes more than the original, maybe a few more minutes than that. Yeah, I enjoyed this cut, I have to say. And I can't remember if I've seen this cut before. I've only ever seen the original cut or not. But yeah, so this is, obviously, it's examining the assassination of JFK and the potential cover-up through the eyes of District Attorney Jim Garrison and all the shenanigans around that. I listened to the commentary track on this one too, and I could be wrong here, but I understand, Becky, you've been watching some JFK documentaries too, assassination documentaries, right? Yeah,
one in particular.
Oh, okay.
And that would be Evidence of Revision, which is 10 hours long.
Blimey, just what? Yeah, one's enough. I have to say, I'm not that clued up on this. My only info really about it is this film and maybe a bit of loose reading about it and a few things here and there. But mostly, I don't know that much about, you know, all the shenanigans and stuff. What about you, Paul? Are you a JFK?
Yeah, no, I've been quite interested in I mean, when I say I love this film, it's probably got just as much to do with the subject matter as the film itself.
Okay.
Because I just think it's a fascinating part of history, world history, not just American history. I mean, I believe that Trump has just rolled back the Freedom of Information Act on the JFK paper, a lot of the JFK documents.
Yeah.
So it's become a sort of generational thing with people passing it on to their children so they can go and get the look at these what actually happened. And the longer that it's gone on, and the longer that the government have kept back all this information, the more it says, well, there's only really one reason for that.
Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff that comes out in the film, I think to me, there's a lot of bullshit in this film, but there's lots of things that's like, well, that's obviously something dodgy, sketchy, definitely going on there. There's so much evidence, you know, from various people. There's something sketchy, but unfortunately, it kind of got
surprisingly, the film is reasonably accurate with a lot of the factual stuff that it puts in, all the sort of biographical stuff about Oswald and his military history and stuff like that. All that's spot on.
Yeah.
I think that. I mean, I remember there being quite a big outcry against the film when it came out.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that, but reading up on it, certainly in America, there was they did not like it, did they?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I remember it getting a really bad reaction, and people tried to use the fact that there was some sort of a dramatic inference of the facts in the film as well. Yeah. Because obviously, but I mean, every film made by any filmmaker, you always see the opinion of the filmmaker coming out in the final product. It's very difficult not to, I suppose, because we all have opinions about things.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I have to say, I always liked the way this film started, and kudos for John Williams' score, which it kind of evolves as the film goes on, doesn't it, really? Any first thoughts on the opening? The opening scene really is Eisenhower's farewell address, isn't it? Where he's gives that really odd speech about the military-industrial complex. That's really something. And then we get Martin Sheen doing a voiceover. And John Williams' score's fairly militaristic. You get that sort of militaristic vibe. And it has that interesting statistic that JFK only wins by just over, 100,000 votes over Nixon. Which is like, wow, what comes around goes around, right? It seems to be like that. Seems to be West, certainly in Britain and America now. Everything's 50-50, you can't call it. It feels like, it's like no one can really, there's never a decisive decision. Any thoughts on the opening scene, Becky?
Well, I think, just touching on what Paul said there, I think Oliver Stone in particular was so controversial anyway that, just reading up, because I was only 6 when the film came out, so I came to it obviously a lot later, but
for God's sake.
the really hostile responses that I've been, reading up on, it just kind of blew me away. But I think that Oliver Stone, we've got to kind of cast your mind back to that time. The actual film farm itself, it must have been so edgy and really must have taken everyone aback. The way that he merges, documentary footage with his own footage very seamlessly at the beginning. It sets the whole film. It's quite jarring, and you can see why people may have been affronted. And he's a really interesting filmmaker, I think, and he takes that throughout his whole career, especially within his, presidential films. But I'm trying to put myself in that mindset of just how shocking this film would have been back then.
No, it was 1991. It wasn't 1965. I mean,
no, in terms of the farm, it plays with classical kind of Hollywood, farm and narrative. And the John Williams score for me really, it doesn't work because it takes away from that verite. It's as though the score is trying to temper the film a little bit.
Well, the score is deliberately militaristic. And the drum beat, I believe, is a drum beat from a military funeral procession. So I think that there's something being said there by Williams or Stone or both of them. But I think that it's interesting that he chooses to, the first couple of actual film scenes, because there's only a couple of sort of 30-second film scenes in amongst a lot of newsreel footage in the opening of the film, and he chose to shot them both in black and white to match the newsreel, which instantly starts to sort of blend fact and fiction, which I think that was what got the reaction in the first place, was that people weren't sure what they were being like, whether the real bits were real and the fake bits were fake, or what was going on.
Yeah, it was like an exploration of different films. I think you're talking about different like film stocks and shadings and stuff, Becky, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, totally. And, I think it's very much, the film itself is, a simulacrum.
What do you mean by that?
In terms of, the artistic definition, that it's a copy of something that isn't necessarily the original, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I kind of get what you mean. I mean, he went on to like explore these different film stocks to the nth degree in like Natural Born Killers, right? A couple of years after that. But the other thing is, Stone was always kind of. He was involved in films that kind of lit the imagination somewhat and were kind of controversial, I guess, like Platoon. And Wall Street was a massive thing when it came out. I remember, Gordon Gekko, Greedy's good and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, he's always been a bit of a sort of liberal, anti-establishment director. All of his films have a slight sort of the powers that be are crazy and we're just caught in the middle of it thing going on.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to Salvador, I guess, right? And wasn't he involved in Midnight Express as well? There was kind of a bit of that too, wasn't there?
Yeah, he was.
And Scarface too was fairly controversial back in the day. Yeah, so it starts with that quite, as I say, I find it quite an astounding speech from Eisenhower because I didn't realise he was addressing the idea of the military-industrial complex so direct. I didn't realise that was a true thing until I saw this film. It was conspiracy nuts.
after the Second World War.
Yeah,
because it was such a money spinner that all grew up after the Second World War, and Eisenhower saw that and saw that it could lead to bad things, basically, when that much money and power is involved.
Yeah, and then we get a voiceover of Martin Sheen. Martin Sheen's an interesting choice. Now, Martin Sheen has played JFK, but I can't remember if he played it after this film or before, but, he's...
And he's played the president.
Yep.
His own president, hasn't he?
Yes. They talk about Cuba, Castro, the Bay of Pigs. That all kind of gets put in the blender with this, and then it comes to like the big deal, which is the Cuban Missile Crisis. But then there's some stuff about JFK addressing like global issues. We all breathe the same air and stuff like that. So sort of showing JFK as an inspirational figure, somewhat. And he's often held. I mean, this film kind of takes that as a truth, doesn't it? JFK, was a modernizer that kind of got cut short. Really, that's the kind of thrust to this. But then we get this kind of undercurrent. This whole little scene of a woman being thrown out of a car, and then sort of screaming in the hospital that they're going to kill the president. In a few days and all this. So yeah. And then there's some other shots where we see a bit of the parade. And again, he's mixing up real footage, I think, with fake. It's really hard to tell sometimes. And we see a man like having a fit, some sort of seizure on the pavement, right?
Uh-huh.
And we see other things like, showing you the sort of milieu. There's a poster of JFK it's a wanted poster saying wanted for treason, and he's using also listen to the commentary on this. Oliver Stone's saying now he uses all sorts of different stocks during this. He was using the 8mm, 16mm, 35mm. He talked about using a specific type of stock that was associated with the early 60s movies. And then what he said is, as time moves on, he uses stocks that were more common in that year, the later 60s. So it kind of
he matches the Sabruta film and the different newsreel stock footage that he uses as well. I mean, it's really cleverly put together.
It's clever, but he's also trying to use our film literacy, in his favour by sort of using stock from early 60s that was most commonly used in early 60s movies versus like 67, 68 kind of movies, which is interesting, really subtle, but very interesting. And rewatching it becomes more and more obvious. But through a first watch, it's just because the whole film is like a wall of sensory input, isn't it, almost? It's kind of overwhelming. And then they hear we kind of see Garrison, don't we? And they hear there's a news report about Kennedy's been shot, and he goes to the bar with a TV. And then we get that quite famous bit of footage of the newsreader announcing the president's dead, and who kind of gets tearful. I've seen that before this film. That piece of film was around before this film was made. I'm sure I've seen it. Interesting to see, but then we get all the different opinions, there's guys like saying, "Oh, great," and all this, and that was really something. The guy who shouted out in the bar, who's saying, who was shouting out against Kennedy, was the real Perry Rousseau, the guy that played by Kevin Bacon. That was the real guy.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that until I heard it on the commentary. And then we get Garrison sort of commenting, "I've never been more ashamed to be an American." So we get that.
Did you notice, just a weird aside, but when we first see Garrison sat at his desk, he's got a Nazi helmet on his desk.
I did not notice that. That's
He's
weird.
got a helmet with the swastika pointing out. It's very fucking strange. I've always noticed it. It really jumped out at me for some reason. I always struck it as... I mean, he does reference the fact that he'd seen combat, and that had to be Second World War because of his age and the time the film's set. So maybe it's a souvenir, but it's a little bit odd.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is an era where a lot of the men would have been in that. You know, they've got that common experience, haven't they, fighting for their country?
Yeah, and you see that it's older guys that are sort of shouting out against Kennedy in the bar scene. And I mean, the whole film's got very much an undercurrent of sort of the old establishment fighting against new stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
With the 60s social scene and the sort of global changes.
Yeah, for sure. Any thoughts on that, Becky, on that bar scene?
No, just to say again that I think you touch on again what Paul said, you get that current, the kind of social climate that the current is very nuanced. And you get those, the scene with the two men drinking and voicing their opinion. It's just a little, again, quite a verite style. It seems to jump. It's quite disjointed. And you get all those different influences. But sometimes they don't quite tie together like I think you would from a filmmaker who would be a little bit more classical in terms of the filmmaking. And I think that really adds to the overall effect of the film. Like you say, it's very sensory. And there's so much going on. And...
It's a film with muscles, is how I feel
Yeah.
about it. It kind of really throws itself about quite a way. It doesn't just say, let me take you on a nice, gentle journey. It's like, you're following me. It's pulling you around by the nose, a lot of this. And, there's so much going on and hard to take in. It is quite difficult to take it all in. For example, the next shot, we kind of see the shot of the guy who's a railway switchman talking about he thinks he saw shots coming from the fence, and then we get almost like a flash frame of him laying dead in an car accident, which is like, what's that got to do with it? We find out later, but it's kind of disorientating somewhat, right? And then we get a lot of intercutting between real witnesses and dramatised witness, again mixing it all up. There's a lot of comments about the shots coming from the fence, which is fair enough. But then we again jump to something completely different. Again, we get Ed Asner sort of kind of drunk and Jack Lemmon sort of talking, and Ed Asner really hates Kennedy and going on about it. And there's lots of like blip frames of info being thrown at you as well for all of this. Interesting. And then we get stuff about the news about a cop's been shot away from the scene and Lee Harvey Oswald's involved. And then when Jack Lemmon mentions, I haven't been breaking into your office and all this, because Ed Asner starts going, oh, you've been looking at my stuff. He goes, I don't have to break into your office to see the weird stuff going on around, which he shouldn't have said at that point. So Ed Asner gives him a bit of a smack, right? So again, that's setting up something quite early on. That comes a fair bit later. So again, a bit of disorientation there. It's really I cannot cast myself back on how I felt about it the first time I watched the film. I do remember finding the film kind of electric, but a lot of it was, I think for the first watching, is what the hell's going on here? Why are we told all this stuff? There's a bit of that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
When did you first
I'm not so
see
sure
this?
because I think that often the flash frames and clips in between are always just backing up the dialogue.
Do you think? No, I mean, I don't.
I take the point with the shot of the guy who the railway switchman, Ralph, whatever his name was. I take the point with the flash of that, but I think that's just sort of the build up as you start to see the witnesses dropping like flies throughout the film. But I think that most of the time when these characters are sort of raving about what they've been involved in or what's going on or who knows what, the clips you're seeing are backing up the story they're telling.
Yeah, yeah, you got a point. Yeah, that does. I mean, even that.
But that's not to say that the first time I saw it, I got it straight away.
Yeah. There's always an implication of something sinister going on, isn't there, when you get all these blip verts? It's a bit like, I kind of equate it to, sometimes if you see two people in the street, it's fine. But if someone was to show you that meeting through a telephoto lens in black and white, it'd look much more sinister. Do you know what I mean?
This is one of the things this is kind of like a scene built out of hearsay. I mean, no one was there but these two men.
Yeah.
And neither of them would talk to anybody about it. So this is one of the scenes where obviously the screenwriters, Stone and whoever it was, did the screenplay. They obviously took a bit of dramatic license here, and the way they tell it backs up the rest of their opinion in the film.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, it's not saying anything particularly strongly, other than one guy's getting a bit angry with the other because he's sort of said, "I've seen weird things going on." Well,
no, it says that an ex-FBI and OSS man is up to something shady and is paranoid about it, and doesn't want his writer friend, sort of speaking about it out of turn, and pistol whips him in the office. I think it's pretty dodgy.
Yeah, that's true.
I also found that a bit interesting that you get the point of view shot.
Which one?
In that particular scene with the two men in the office, when he's beating him, you're getting that beating from his perspective, and you get a different look to the actual shot itself. This is a film that's playing with facts and blurring fiction into it, but that you get a designated point of view shot.
Yeah.
It just adds that extra layer that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, indeed. There's something then Jim Garrison starts talking about how the fact he notices how cool Oswald is under pressure, which makes him think he's not guilty. Now that, I think, informs the whole film, in fact. It definitely informs Gary Oldman's performance here. The more times I see this film, the more impressed I am with Oldman's performance here, actually.
It's spooky how much he looks like Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, indeed. But also, its whole performance really feels like someone who is not guilty.
He feels like someone who's caught up in something that's out of his control, really.
Yeah.
He's just been swept along, isn't he?
Yeah, in fact, whenever he's talking, he definitely comes across as someone who is like a patsy, as he says. But when we see him not talking, set in scenes by Oliver Stone, he's up to shady stuff. But when he's talking for himself, he's not. It's a very interesting sort of mix.
Well, I think that's one of the that's the kind of the, because all the facts that they tell you about his military career and his Russian training and his defection and all that's true, all that's factual.
Yeah.
But then you throw in, I mean, which could just say that he was an agent for America. That's all that says, really.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make him dodgy at all. But when you throw in him stood in the corners of dark rooms with shady Cubans up to mischief, then it kind of backs up the liberal slant that he was up to no good and part of the Kennedy plot.
Indeed, yeah. We see him in shady rooms. We see him like in one of the training camps. We get a brief glimpse of him there, And Stone actually says on the commentary track, he says, I've got no idea whether he was supposed to be in any of these, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to put him in. That was kind of Stone's take on that. And then the name of David Ferry comes up as someone who's often seen with Lee Harvey Oswald. So that's our introduction to the character of Dave Ferry, played by Joe Pesci. Yeah.
I think Joe Pesci is a tour de force in this film.
There's
the later scene when he's falling apart and his wig's all cockeyed and they're trying to calm him down is one of the best performances I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's pretty solid. He apparently got properly psyched up for that as well. Stone was talking about it. He's just saying, you know, we had to really calm him down after this. He really wound himself up to that. You can tell it really works. It really works. We see his various staff now. It's a bit of a shame because some of his stuff are fairly effective, but when Stone talks about it, he goes, that person didn't actually exist. It's an amalgam of all these people, and he says, don't do that to us, kind of thing. In fact, Laurie Metcalf character, who's I think is really good in this, that person is just an amalgam of all the women that helped, but he wanted to sort of indicate women were involved in the investigation as well as men, but they were fairly junior, so it's a shame really, but she's really good. It
was the 60s though, wasn't it?
That's true. Then we kind of see Ruby shooting Oswald. We get a touch of that. So Jack Ruby, how Stone asked the question, in the commentary track, how the hell did Ruby get into that garage? Which I guess has been answered, but I don't know what the answer to that is.
Someone let him in.
Yeah. He walked through the door, right? So we get this David Ferry, like you say, Joe Pesci, he's brought in, and we get that amazing story about goose hunting.
Duck hunting, goose hunting, yeah.
They want to go skating, yeah. And on the way back, they want to go was it goose or duck hunting without any guns? When the Garrison sort of says, I don't find your story convincing, he goes, really?
Which
what
bit?
part? Amazing. That wig was really something, right?
Yeah, and those Scouse brows as well.
Yeah. It's properly painted on. And then we get I find this quite a touching shot. We get the real footage of, well, I believe it's real, of JFK Jr., the little boy, saluting his dad's coffin. Oh, man, that's sad.
Yeah, but if we had a prime minister assassinated, would anybody give a toss in this country? Do you think if Theresa May was took out by a sniper tomorrow, anybody would be shedding tears in front of the news in the morning? Because I don't think they would.
No, I don't think so. I think there's been a few times at certain periods there's been certain prime ministers where people would be a bit sad. I know this is really dredging back people's memories, but if Tony Blair, for example, had been assassinated just after he got in 1997, people would have been properly upset about that. But after
if only
that,
they knew
not.
that.
If only they knew.
Yeah.
Well, that might have happened with JFK. We don't know, right? If he hadn't been shot. So he's questioned. He's taken by the FBI, isn't he? Garrison sort of hands him over to the FBI, I think. They say they can't find any connection between Ferry and Oswald. And they also make in the news statement that it wasn't them that brought him in, it was under the request of DA Garrison. They're kind of basically saying Garrison made us do it, we didn't really want to. And then we get to the whole Warren Committee stuff. And it jumped forward 3 years, right? So I think my favourite scene up.
Well, I like the fact that they get Jim Garrison to play Earl Warren in the film.
It's interesting, because when I saw that, I thought that guy looks just like Jack Elam. I thought, no, Jack Elam died years ago, right? And I looked it up, and it's like, it's Garrison himself. I didn't realise. I did not realise. So we get the Warren Committee, and then we jump forward 3 years, and he's on a plane with Walter Matthau. Looks really like Nixon to me in this scene. Actually, it's just like Nixon. In fact, first time I saw her, I thought,
it's an interesting little conversation that they have, because it kind of it's another sort of example of the old and the new, that sort of clash of the old and the new, when he's talking about Vietnam and how he talk about a pregnant girl he sees showing her belly in the street and
that's
stuff.
Right.
And but he also says that he's also the one that first says in the film that the JF shooting was dodgy, that there's something gone on, and he's the first one to mention the magic bullet as well.
Yeah, he says no way could one guy get 3 shots off like that with that accuracy, and he proposes that Oswald was a patsy. That's essentially it. So that gets old Garrison back to thinking about it again. We then see his sort of home life a bit. We get Sissy Spacek looking gorgeous, it has to be said, as his missus, who keeps wanting to drag him off.
Sissy Spacek freaks me out.
Why?
In everything she's in, I don't know. She's creepy.
Creepy?
I think she's creepy.
Do you?
Yeah, like some sort of bold reptilian thing underneath, and that's the big wig she's put on.
Yeah, it is a big wig. Yeah, a big wig. Yeah,
she's very otherworldly in her beauty, shall we say?
It's like who's the
Tilda Swinton? She reminds me.
Yes, Tilda Swinton. That's the one. She's very asexual, I think.
Yeah, and depending on how they're dressed and makeup, they look completely different sometimes. I know what you mean.
And she bugs me. She's the character that bugs me in this film because after all the shit that happens and all the stuff that Garrison turns up, she doesn't believe him until Bobby Kennedy gets shot. And then I'm like, oh, well, now you believe him. That's great, that is.
There is, to me, the next bit of the film is the first bit where I think, yeah, there's something there. There's something there for sure. Where they start talking about how many...
About Garrison's home.
Yeah.
Have you noticed how sort of how it's lit and how sepia and sort of idyllically 50s it is? Because
it's
as soon as they show him with his kids, and even the way he interacts with his children, how his children talk, it's very, very traditional, old-fashioned, old world. It's quite odd. It's always quite jarring when you suddenly see him at home. It's a bit like Frank Black in Millennium, and how yellow and shiny and beautiful and clean his lovely home was, and all the sort of nastiness he deals with away from it.
Yeah, no, I always felt that seemed kind of right to me. What about you, Beck?
Well, I think that, in terms of her character, his wife, that she wants to go back to those old values and she's trying to hold on to that. It's kind of facade. Yeah. And by the end, where she breaks down because the case and his obsession is, taking over and breaking the family down, I think that speaks to the wider values and, like, Paul was saying about that change.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. I have to say, though, I think Sissy Spacek looks lovely in this. I don't care what you say about Alien.
I think she's reptilian. A bit Stepford vibes in this.
I don't mind that.
Dear me.
So, the first... The first thing that I think rang a bell with me, like, yeah, something to this, was all the stuff about how they talk about how many witnesses at the Warren Commission talked about the grassy knoll, and the smoke rising from the hill and stuff. 33 witnesses?
Apparently those are genuine. Those are the genuine interviews that actors are just reading. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. 33 different people sort of testified to that and completely ignored by the Warren Commission.
When I don't know, when the original VHS copy of JFK was released, it was released with another cassette that had a documentary on it.
Right.
And at the end of the documentary, they list about 150 names of the witnesses that were there on the day and that contributed to the case, and it lists, all of them are dead, and it lists all the different ways they died, and it's car accident, boat accident, some of them are just blows to the neck. I mean, it got really lazy at some points, but it's just name after name, and there were so many boating accidents and car accidents that it started to seem like, well, that's not a coincidence, is it? That's an outlier, if anything.
That sounds bizarre. They then go to the scene with the railroad switchman, whose name's Lee Bowers, and they talk about. He starts talking about there's 3 cars driving around a car park like they're checking it out, and there's some men looking over a fence. One of them's in like a police uniform, I think. And then he says at the point of the shooting, there was a flash of light on the embankment. And then we get the news that he died in a freak accident a few years later, which is the thing we kind of had a flash of earlier. So Stone on the commentary track, he was saying he was trying to recreate like Rashomon, like a Rashomon moment with this, giving different, points of view from different witnesses and stuff. It's interesting that some of the witnesses apparently who said that they saw smoke coming up from the trees said there were 4 shots, and stuff like this, and all that, which comes back again later in the film, doesn't it? About echoing shots and all this sort of stuff. As Garrison then digs in, he kind of finds out more about Oswald, right? About all this extra training, Russian language training, all this sort of stuff. So we get like the hint that sort of Oswald's probably a spy or an intelligence, right? And he seems to be involved in trying to infiltrate different groups, it would appear, if he is a spy. And it kind of fits, doesn't it? The whole thing fits that he's working for the government and he's like just doing stuff to get intelligence on both home groups and possibly, Russia and stuff. Right? That's how it kind of feels.
Yeah, it does. So there are, from his career record, there are only certain reasons why he'd have had things like language training, and the ease in which he left and re-entered America is probably the biggest weird one. Yeah, because of how sort of terrified and anti-communist America was in the late 50s and 60s. To have someone defect to Russia and then return, that was just unheard of.
Yeah. And then we go back to the Ed Asner office, where it turns out Oswald was campaigning out of that guy's office. Guy Bannister is his name, his office, because he accidentally gives out leaflets with Guy Bannister's office, sort of a print, saying the address by mistake. And we get a shot of like Ed Asner getting angry about it, I think, and then we also get a scene of Ed Asner laughing about it because, like, that guy, So it's like we're getting different viewpoints almost back to back on there. It's kind of weird. And also we start getting involved again with David Ferry. He comes back, him in his dodgy wig, come back on the scene, and he starts talking about he was involved in sort of training Cuban exiles to invade Cuba. And it all gets into the Bay of Pigs stuff, doesn't it? It's like,
Operation Mongoose, it was a real operation, which is the one that they talk about quite a lot in the film, where they were training Cuban exiles to invade Cuba. I think that sort of sprang out from the where Kennedy didn't back them for the Bay of Pigs, and they saw the Cuban Missile Crisis as a failure, not a victory.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's so much going on politically, and obviously the amounts of money involved in it all as well. Because some of the figures they give out in the film for how much the military-industrial complex generates financially for America are just fucking frightening.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? This is like the first time we start getting a hint of like there's hatred against Kennedy for the Bay of Pigs. So there's a suggestion there that his decision to sort of not help there might have been instrumental in his assassination. Right, there's that kind of hint going on. And then we're given the sort of news that Kennedy told the FBI they have to shut up all these training camps, but they got all loads of guns and ammo and everything. And the FBI had to go shut up. But there's this comment that the FBI's hearts weren't really in it. They kind of didn't mind them doing all this. And there's a hint that Oswald was like hanging around these camps too, right? So again, we've got lots of different types of footage. And, some of it's grainy, black and white. It feels almost like blown up Super 8 and stuff like that. Pretty cool stuff. What do you think of it, Becky?
Yeah, again, so much. It's sensory-wise, like you were saying, in terms of the film itself, the stock and everything, but also just the amount of information. For somebody coming to this new, I think, who's not seen it, and like me, who hasn't seen it literally, I think I watched parts of it as a kid. I don't remember watching it all the way through before now. So that's a hell of a lot of information to get in. I mean, and when you start to research, around it. I mean, it's a minefield, isn't it? You just go in further and further into different conspiracies and that, but it's really building up now, even from this point, that sense of paranoia and conspiracy, and just how obsessive that is really around coming into Kevin Costner's character, Jim Garrison.
Yeah.
Because I think of all the films like this where you get, an obsessed person who is hell-bent on searching for the truth, an example off the top of my head would be Zodiac. You don't really get that much of a sense, I think, of Kevin Costner's character. And I don't know whether that's his acting. I just think, like, certain scenes in the film, he plays against Donald Sutherland, and, we measure his acting against other scenes, like with Gary Oldman. And for me, he's very wooden. And I don't necessarily think that he's bad in this film. I think, was Prince of Thieves just before this film? Because is that what he was riding the back of to get?
I think so.
So,
I think so.
You see, do you know what I mean? It's everything starting to come together. You've got all those stylistic and very purposeful choices from Stone, and even like the choice of actors. I think choosing him as his lead really lends to maybe that sense of trust in him and how people interpret it, especially somebody coming to it new, or people who may be more impressionable. But for me, I wasn't too set on Kevin Costner as Jim Garrison.
Oh,
but
right.
what did you think about the acting, the casting choices?
I think he's great.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's a deliberate choice by Stone, because to me he kind of evokes the kind of Gregory Peck, Atticus Finch kind of vibe.
He's also very much doing almost an impression of Jim Garrison.
I didn't know
that.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, if you see Garrison in the film, that's how he is in every interview and every bit of footage you ever seen in. He's quite deliberate, and he's quite stiff, and he's quite a traditional kind of guy. And I think that's maybe, I don't know. I love Kevin Costner in this film. I think he's great.
Yeah, I have to say I kind of like him too. I could kind of see your points, Becky, but I think there's like 5 really solid performances in this film, actually. Mainly because no one else gets a chance. It's Gary Oldman, it's Kevin Costner, Donald Sutherland, Kevin Bacon and Joe Pesci, right? And those, because they're in it for so much shorter, all the other ones are in it for so much shorter, they have much more impact, whereas Costner's got to ride the whole thing out, but it kind of works. I have to say Tommy Lee Jones too gives a good performance, but there's much more subdued than the other ones. I kind of like him in this, but to me, I feel he was cast because he had that sort of Atticus Finch thing, but it sounds like it was because he was kind of like he could do Garrison, maybe, right?
It's things like, I mean, knowing more about the film kind of endears Kevin Costner's performance to me as well, because his courtroom closing is a one take.
That is an amazing take.
He learnt that speech and then delivers it like that with the tears and the sort of impassioned pleas to the jury. He delivers that in one take, and that's just a spectacular piece of acting.
It is very good. He's and it is kind of nice that he's subdued almost for the rest. No matter what crazy stuff happens, he kind of keeps a lid on it, doesn't he? Except one or two other. There's a few other points where he kind of starts to get emotional, but it really kind of pays off in that final court scene.
When he says that he's fucked and tells his wife that she's fucked too, and she says, "Oh, you've never spoken to me like this before, Jim." That always makes me laugh. I think he's saying I have in my head.
Yeah. Then we get John Candy in this, who apparently was super sweaty. Because he was super nervous, because he's always done comedy. So, I know it was like somewhat of a comedy character in this, in terms of a sort of be a larger than life character, but he was very, very nervous playing this teenager.
Being sweaty kind of suits the location and the scene, though, doesn't it? And the character.
Yeah, and he's talking all this daddy-o stuff. Yeah, that was did make me laugh. And I think this is the first time we get like Clay Bertrand mentioned, isn't we? And Clay Shaw and stuff like that. Well, probably not the first time, but that kind of becomes significant in it. Then Garrison sort of says that I'm going to call you, and then we'll get to the bottom of whether you know him or not, kind of thing. But Stone does say in the commentary track that John Candy was sweating profusely pretty much all the time while he was doing this.
Was it shot on location? I can't remember.
Well, it looks like it is, but I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have a look. It definitely looked like New Orleans, didn't it?
Because it's pretty hot and sweaty down in that part of America.
Yeah. And then we get to Kevin Bacon scene, which I thought always makes me laugh. Now, apparently, again, this was like a composite of several homosexual characters, but it was mostly based on Perry Russo, who I think Bacon kind of is a bit of a tour de force here. I mean, everyone knew him, right? He was like, I guess, before this, probably Tremors and Footloose and stuff, right?
Yeah, I think he was a pretty big star by the time he did JFK.
Yeah, but it really works, this scene, I think. And I do like the bit about, you don't know the truth because you've never been fucked in the arse. That makes me laugh. Basically, he tells about, Ferry introduced him to Clay Bertrand for sexual services. And then we kind of see a party with Cubans. Lee Harvey Oswald kind of gets put into the milieu. Now, I don't know if there's any truth in this. Do you know, Paul?
It's one of those things where the thing is that all the stuff you see where, like the bit you talked about with Guy Bannister having a go at him about printing the address on his pro-Castro leaflets and then just laughing about it later in private. I'm not sure whether that is just Oliver Stone enforcing his opinion that Oswald was working for an anti-communist working for the American government still, or whether because the fight between him and the Cubans is a thing that's on record.
Yeah,
and the fact that I think they say that the cop says he thought it felt staged. Yeah, when he broke the fight up, and that's all sort of an official record. So it's a bit difficult. Like I say, it's a bit difficult to tell, even if you know quite a lot about the JFK assassination. The sort of finer points around the edges of it are still up for debate. I suppose, which is why there's so many conspiracy theories, because it can neither be proved nor disproved.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the evidence or suggestions will come from books that themselves are kind of speculating, so you really can't be sure, right? There's a scene with a party where they're kind of there, Lee Harvey Oswald's there, and Dave Ferry starts getting annoyed about Kennedy shutting down the camps, and then he starts talking about, if we wanted to kill him, we'd use a triangulated crossfire and stuff like that. But Clay kind of does he kick him in the bollocks or something? I'm trying to remember now. He shuts him down basically when he starts talking about stuff like that.
I don't know, puts him in a nipple clamp or something.
And stuff like that. There's Stone also mentions, we can. Well, he's been fairly even-handed about this. Stone in the commentary track mentions that, some of these men had aliases, but it was quite common in the homosexual community to have aliases because you needed to protect yourself, which I think is a fair point. We may not consider much these days, but it sounds kind of reasonable. Now, I noticed at this point when I was watching this, the score starts to change a bit. It turns from not so much militaristic. It reminded me of Mission Impossible. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of sort of slightly more ominous tones and stuff.
Oh, please sing more.
No, I'm not going to do that because I can't remember how it went. I'm trying to have Mission Impossible. It's not the same thing though.
No, it's like a horn.
Yeah, that's right.
A brass horn kind of melody.
It's a bit Bernard Hermony kind of stuff, Is that kind of
Bernard Hermony?
Bernard Hermony, bit Hitchcocky, right? What do you think Bacon in this bit, Becky?
Oh, great turn from him.
Yeah, he was really going for it, wasn't he? He was sweating too, I noticed.
And just to touch on what you said about these characters being an kind of an amalgamation of several different people, the script writing in that respect, I think, is brilliant.
I think there was a lot of Perry Russell there, because this sounded like someone who was really convinced. He was going on about how Nixon should have been a great president. He's a great man, and he's glad Kennedy's dead. That sounded like coming straight from someone who really believes that. The dialogue really sounded like that to me.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I mean, just to tackle the amount of facts and speculation, and like you say, take several different people and get ideas and such across via one character, I think is a really hard feat. Yeah,
indeed. There's also some talking again in the commentary. I keep going on about the commentary tonight. Stone believed that Lee Harvey Oswald had his own sense of morality, and he kind of conveyed that to Gary Oldman, and he think Gary Oldman really conveyed that point too, as very well. Which I think there's something to the Oswald here is quite, considering he's not given that much screen time, I think it's kind of quite a complex character. What do you think, Paul?
I agree. I think. I mean, I tend to think that Oswald was more than likely some kind of decoy, but then you can't really make sense of everything else. That's all I could definitely say, having sort of read books and watched documentaries and seen as much of the evidence as I can. What this film does is change him from just the lone gunman to a fleshed out human being. You get background. I mean, they give you his biography. I mean, it is intercut with someone doing the 60s version of photoshopping for his picture stood in front of the white picket fence with the rifle.
Yeah.
But the biography you get of Oswald does sort of paint. I mean, it seems to me that he was someone that worked for the military, so he was obviously a patriot. But it sort of, once he came back to America, he was obviously picked to be the sort of the fall guy.
Indeed. I always found that the fact that he was seen, I mean, this comes up later in the film, but he was seen like sitting on a different floor in the repository in his lunch about about the time of the shooting, which to me suggests he was a patsy. He wasn't involved at all in that. And there's also there's some secondary evidence like they couldn't find any nitrate on his hands, so indicating he hadn't shot a rifle and stuff like that.
And the fact that his military record states that he was an average marksman, which he became a radar man.
Yeah. We do get a dodgy, again, a speculative shot of the rifle being put. We see the dead Lee Harvey Oswald laid out and the rifle pressed against his hand to make the prints and taken away, which is Stone playing about again. So we then we start tracking to the witnesses, I think, on Elm Street, right? We have this blonde woman talking about where the shot came from. So we get more of the shots didn't necessarily come from the book repository. It was, possibly from the hill or somewhere else. And then there's also talk about tracks being found behind this fence. And then another woman talks about the fact she saw Jack Ruby driving a truck that was parked up and a guy taking a gun out the back of the truck. And
it's also Jack Ruby that's seen running after the shots fired.
Is it?
She says, I remember everybody else was stood still and this one man was running. And it's the same actor. I don't know whether Stone, I have a feeling that Stone uses the guy playing Jack Ruby in lots of scenes in the film. I mean, he's the same guy in the sunglasses that tells them the name of the anti or pro-Cuban group in the press conference.
I hadn't spotted that. I hadn't spotted that.
they're saying, when one of the reporters asks Oswald if he was ever a member of the Free Cuba movement or something like that, a guy at the back of the room in a hat and sunglasses shouts, "That's the pro-choice Cuba brigade," or something like that. And that's the same actor that plays Jack Ruby as well.
I didn't notice that. That's Jack Murray, Bill Murray's brother.
So I'm not so sure whether he's saying that Ruby was involved at all levels, or whether he's saying the mafia were involved at all levels, or whether he's just doing that just to play with the audience.
Indeed. And then we see a scene of a guy, like an FBI guy, maybe interviewing this woman who says there was 4 to 6 shots, and he's like insisting to her that she only heard 3. And stuff like that. She says, no, the shots came from the fence. He goes, no, you heard echoes and all this. Which again is setting up the sort of premise that someone in government might be involved in this and trying to sort of cover up the fact there was more than 3. But equally, it could have been like a guy saying, well, we can't start speculating this. There was only 3 shots and we don't want it getting out that there was more, because that'll just create like a whole thing that didn't really happen. Who knows, right? But Stone setting up that sort of that level of insecurity about what's going on.
Well, yeah, but one would think if you're investigating the murder of your president, that if more than one person says there was more than 3 shots, that would be something worthy of investigation, not sort of a cover-up.
Yeah, and they make the point that this interview took place like 20 minutes after the shooting, and so instead of like trying to figure out where the shooter was, they were trying to harass this woman into changing her statement, right? So it was very shady. So then we also get some more stuff about this woman, this like brassy blonde woman. I think her name was Beverly, talking about like the night spot where Jack Ruby's club was. And she was sort of they're talking about Ruby kind of being involved with the mob and stuff like that. And she says she remembers Ruby introducing Lee Harvey Oswald and a guy with weird eyebrows. Who can that be? She says she always remembers that she might forget a name, but she always remembers a face.
You start to get the feeling at this point, though, that I mean, up until the point where they'd start talking about there being multiple Oswalds popping up all over the place, that people are kind of leading Oswald around and getting people to notice him.
Yeah. I mean, they make a point earlier that he ordered this rifle in a completely traceable way. Why would he do that when he could just walk in off the street and just buy one for cash and give a false address? Right? So, yeah, that's a point, right? Anyway, this girl, Beverly, they asked her if she'll testify. And I have to say, I think the actress gave a good performance here. I can't remember the actress's name, but she was very memorable. You know, she just says a simple line: "If they can kill the president of the United States, do you think they'd think twice about killing a 2-bit showgirl like me?" And she, I thought it was a really quite short but quite an effective scene. Actually, it's like all this. It is now people are frightened to speak because they think, if they can kill the president, what they're going to do? We ain't got any hope of sort of getting through this and telling the truth. So there's a bit of that, and that kind of also happened with Jack Lemmon, right? When they talked to him.
Yeah, I like the scene with Lemmon when he says at the end, he just says, "You're so naive," and then walks off. Because there's a lot of kind of they say that the assassination of JFK was the death of American innocence. And you get the bit after Garrison's spoken to Mr. X when he's kind of the brass instrument sections playing gently in the background, and he's walking around different American monuments looking wistfully into the distance. You can see that kind of playing out on screen.
Yeah. Then we get Stone starts talking about the fact they basically recreated the whole incident on Elm Street, and he said they were filming for 3 weeks to do that shooting scene. And Stone says he found it completely depressing. And with all the extras standing around and having to keep recreating this like murder of a president. he just found it completely disheartening, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is. But I can't really get that way of thinking. I'm sure that's kind of an American thing that assassination still affects people 50 years on or 40 years on, whenever he made it.
Yeah, I guess it's much more powerful in the American psyche than ours, that's for sure. Though it did have an impact around the world, I think. Funny enough, I've just been watching The Crown, season 2 of The Crown, and there is an episode with JFK, who's a complete dick presented as a complete dick in The Crown, and Jackie Kennedy, and like how the Queen reacts when she hears about the shooting. So it's kind of interesting. Just watching it by coincidence, and it happened to be part of that series, kind of interesting kind of perspective. I have to say, there was one bit that did make me laugh in this. We get a New Orleans like parade, like a Mardi Gras kind of thing, and I could have sworn the music that was playing in that parade was straight out of Live and Let Die. So is that a tribute to Live and Let Die? Which is, yeah, probably not, right?
Aren't they playing when the Saints go marching in?
I thought it was like The Cat Crept In, which is very similar sounding.
When the cats go creeping in.
But it did remind me of Live and Let Die, which is probably inappropriate for this.
That's what I was just touching on when I was talking about the opening shots of the film and how I thought it would be shocking. That's what I was kind of touching on, that, American sense of, patriotism and that loss of innocence. And I do believe that the MPAA, which is Motion Picture Association of America, like BBFC, they, I think it was the head of the MPAA at the time, compared the film to the work of Leni Riefenstahl, which
whoa,
kind of says
over the top.
Well, that's the thing, I think the Americans.
I don't think that JFK is that jingoistic at all. I if anything, he's not glorifying the military or America. He's doing the opposite.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, do you mean in terms of it being propaganda?
Yeah.
For a liberal sort of viewpoint.
I think the quote was that it was a monstrous charade.
The film was a monstrous charade.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can believe that some people would think that.
Look at the quote here. Does any sane human being truly believe that President Johnson, the Warren Commission members, law enforcement officers, CIA, FBI, assaulted thugs, weirdos, frisbee throwers, all conspired together as plotters in Garrison's wacky sightings, and then for almost 29 years nothing leaked, but you have to believe it if you think well of any part of this accusatory lunacy? Can't get my tongue around that one.
Well, there's some dodgy stuff in the Warren report, isn't there? That's for sure.
Yeah, but it just goes to show, like, how, the film itself can be interpreted in so many different ways. I mean, we're obviously reading it one way, but it's just crazy to me that somebody can look at it from that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think if you're led to believe, a lot of people in America would have been led to believe it's just Lee Harvey Oswald. And I still don't know.
Well, I think that the fact that nobody else has been able to recreate 3 shots from the book depository, like even world-class shooters, and the fact that, the magic bullet theory just doesn't make any sense. It really genuinely doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. No,
it's an impossibility.
I've made a note at the end of all the bits of evidence presented in this film that I think show clearly, are clear indicators that it wasn't a lone gunman. So
it's just that I can't understand. I can understand people saying that they don't believe that there was government involvement, or they don't believe necessarily that there was such a big conspiracy around it. But I can't believe people that still believe that Oswald was the lone gunman, because I think that has been definitively scientifically ruled out.
Yeah, I agree. And also, he was shooting through trees, wasn't he, and stuff like leaves, and it's like
none of it makes any sense. It only makes any sense if he was either shot from a different location, or, like they say in the film, that there were redundancies. There were multiple shooters.
Yeah. Doesn't Senator Long, the scene with Walter Matthau, doesn't he say something like, if you round up the 50 best shooters in the US and ask them what they were doing in that day, you'd find out something like that. So yeah. Again, on the commentary track, Stonot talks about Oswald. The fact if he was a patsy, he says he was saying stuff like black ops guys often set up several patsies in each city just in case they need a patsy, and just that Oswald happened to be the best fit that day, or in the circumstances, which kind of sounds really.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that.
Yeah, I think that's a bit parallel.
But hasn't Oliver Stone already shown that Oswald seems to have been groomed to be this patsy, not just being the right man on the spot on the day? I mean, he's been touted around through different anti-communist organisations and different people, various dodgy characters, up until the point where the president shot. So it seems to me like there was quite a lot of pre-planning that went into having somebody who couldn't really back up their background or story in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it would have been... I don't know, how long did he work at the book depository before this happened? Was it very long? Was it a few months? Or...
No, I don't think it was very long.
No, okay, all right. There is the next scene kind of made me laugh quite a bit, which is the scene where Kevin Bacon's dressed as Marie Antoinette and Tommy Lee Jones is painted gold. Apparently, that
creeps me out. That scene does.
That was Tommy Lee Jones's idea. He wanted to do that.
Paint himself gold.
Yeah. How about
Tommy
that?
Lee Jones is brilliant in this film. I think Tommy Lee Jones is just. He plays kind of sinister camp amazingly in this film.
Yeah, he could have been a great Bond villain, really.
Yeah.
So we get some stuff about Clay Shaw at this point, right? Then we come to the great phone scene with Joe Pesci, who's beating the shit out of a phone. Because he's so angry. Because he says, I'm dead, I'm a dead man, and all this, don't they? And they're trying to calm him down and all this. And then he starts... kind of pathetic. He starts going on about, all he wanted to be was a priest, and that he had this one little weakness. Yeah. Oh, shame. Good performance from Pesci.
He ends up looking a bit Donald Trump by the end of the scene. With his crazy wig forward.
Yeah, that wig.
And his mad eyebrows.
Yeah. Them eyebrows are amazing. And then we see him dead, don't we? Bald and dead, which is a shame.
Yeah, and apparent suicide. Yeah,
apparent suicide. He seems to have got pills that raise blood pressure or something. But I found this quite sinister. They kind of skirted over the film. The fact is that his handler happened to get killed on the same day in Miami with a machete.
Yeah.
It wasn't a road accident. Or a boat accident.
Oh, well, like I said, even in that list on the Stone documentary, some of them, it starts off with accidents, but there are some that are just blow to the neck or blow to the head. I'm like, that's how they died. That's all you got from the investigation. Blow to the head.
Blow to the head. Yeah, well, I guess it could have been worse. They could have been all machete wounds, right? I was like,
oh, yeah.
Jason.
Missing head.
Yeah. Then we see a scene where Michael Rooker's character, Michael Rooker appears in this with hair, which is kind of unusual, where they're kind of sort of saying to him, Indian, are you a patriot? And there's this kind of thing.
Oh, is this when his old FBI buddy warns him off the case?
Yeah, that's right.
Which again would send warning bells, wouldn't it? I mean, that's just maybe sort of we are investigating the right place if I'm getting warned off this severely.
Yeah. He kind of goes along with it. And then we get the Donald Sutherland scene. Now,
that would have been weird if it was Donald Trump.
That'd be great. So we get.
Can you imagine coming in drunk and catching this on the TV with Tommy Lee Jones Gold and Marie Antoinette, Kevin Bacon, and then Donald Trump?
Yeah, what the fuck are you watching?
What was the episode of the X-Files?
Yeah,
where Michael Critchkow gives Mulder the sort of 50-year real secret history of the world.
Oh, blimey.
Because it's taken so much from this scene in JFK with Donald Sutherland. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that was season 2. Season 1?
No, I think it might have been the end of season 4, beginning of season 4. There was a 3-parter somewhere.
Oh, we haven't got to that.
I think... Oh, haven't you?
No, we're still on season 4. Is it, Becky?
Yeah, just started season 4.
Yeah, we just started season 4. We slowed up with it. Yeah, I mean, he's Donald Sutherland.
Time. Some nice timing for talking about JFK.
Yeah. So Donald Sutherland plays this character X, who again Stone says, "Oh yeah, it's a composite of all different characters, but we put it together." So this guy's called X, which you're kind of seeing the X-Files all over this now, right? And he gives a really good speech, right? I kind of think of this film was almost like a circus tent of 2 big poles holding it out. The first one being this speech from Sutherland, and the second one being Kevin Costner's speech, in the courtroom. Those are the big scenes in this film. And what is this, about 15 minutes? He's talking?
Yeah, something like that.
It does go on in a good way. And I think in the original cinema cut, they had an interval after this. I could be wrong, an intermission. But Stone kind of talked about
the theatrical version. If you watch the theatrical version, there are scenes where they reference people that have been cut out of the theatrical version. So... Really? Some of the scenes. I mean, if you really struggle to follow JFK with all the information, the theatrical version makes it even more difficult because they refer to scenes that have been cut.
Right. Oh well, I don't remember that. The thing is, one of the things about this film is when you see certain things, like for example, for me it was when they started talking about the fact that Kennedy shutting down the camps led to this antagonism, and maybe they were involved, triangulated crossfire. So throughout the rest of the film, I was trying to remember that as being, maybe it's like this Cuban stuff that's precipitated all this, and I wonder if it'll come out. And it doesn't. So you're kind of carrying like all these thoughts in your head as you're watching the film, which leads it to being quite confusing, right?
Because I think that the main point of the film is that they thought Kennedy would bring them out of Vietnam. Right. And all the stuff that you hear about Kennedy beforehand is kind of adds weight to the military industrial complex's reasons for being part of the assassination.
Yeah.
Because they say the Vietnam War was going to be worth over $100 billion to the United States and to the military complex, and that couldn't be allowed to just go away because Kennedy was some sort of pinko lefty.
Yeah.
So I think that all the other things that you see when you hear about him, they think he was weak in the Bay of Pigs and like he backed down in the Cuban Missile Crisis and all these sorts of things. I think it's just there to lend weight to Stone's argument that the conspiracy ran that deep. Yeah.
It's I think that all the stuff that Sutherland does is it's kind of properly enthralling. I find it. I kind of was aware I was kind of holding my breath through some of it. It was like what's going. It was just a proper wall of info. Done in a fairly visual way, right? The
stuff that they talk about, all the dates he gives out, and the stuff that he says the OSS, and then when they became the CIA, carried out all the different coups d'etats and election rigging. All that is 100% accurate.
Yeah. And he also makes the point about he was, and I guess that, this is a composite character, but there's this point about, he would have been assigned to like security on the president's sort of, on Elm Street, but he got taken off of there, and there wasn't any decent.
That's one of the main things that people point to as being an example of it being a conspiracy, is the fact that the there was really, really low security levels on the day.
Yeah.
And they didn't send out teams to pre-check the area. Like they didn't do things the normal way on that day, basically.
Yeah, you wouldn't have a section of road where you have to slow down if you got.
But yeah, and I do love the way that how that scene's written, the way because he's selling it to you really, but it's sold very well. And it all makes perfect sense as Donald Sutherland delivers it. The idea that there wouldn't be people with umbrellas allowed to open umbrellas on the route, and that they'd have their own snipers in place and all that sort of thing. It kind of makes sense when it's laid out in the film.
It does. And this scene to me is probably the most X-Files scene in the movie. I think. What do you think, Becky?
Definitely. And one thing that really stood out to me, I think, in terms of that connection with X-Files, is that Mulder as a character always wants more, always needs to know more. That obsession, I know it relates back to his sister and everything, but as a person, he needs more information, and he doesn't always get it. And when he does get the overload from Deep Throat, especially towards the end, before he dies, and then from X and other characters, it kind of, no matter how terrible it is or whatever it relates to in the general story arc, it always reinforces what he's doing and his quest and for knowledge and truth and whatever. But here, and I will say that for Kevin Costner's acting here, the truth, as you both referred to, that loss of innocence, you can see it. It's breaking him. He doesn't want to know. He doesn't want to be a part of it, and the weight of it, and the facts that are just coming out of Donald Sutherland's mouth, and a wonderful scene. I think this is probably. I really do like the end, and I do. I will say the court scene again. I really enjoyed that. I didn't think the beginning of the film set up Kevin Costner's character very well, but don't forget I've not watched this as many times as you two have, so that might change. But this is from my kind of recent viewing. But here, this scene, I think I actually preferred this to the end scene, the courtroom scene. I thought it was really fantastic. Yeah,
I think this is my favourite bit in the film, actually. Although I like the film all the way through, this bit is the bit that, I'm like, right, get yourself ready here because we're going on a ride. It's kind of that. This is the big ride in this film. Really. I do really enjoy it.
I used to know. No, I'm not going to do that.
Donald Sutherland just does a great job. He just does a really good job. I'll be interested in like doing a bit of research and digging out all the characters that were the composite that made this one, because I'm sure
I think
there was a truth in this. It just felt like true. It felt true to me.
I think from what I have read that there was somebody that helped in terms of crafting the film and the script, but that this person didn't exist. But I could be wrong, Paul.
Yeah, I'm not. I think I know. I've because I've listened to the commentary as well, and I know that he was apparently made up of several points of information, like people that had worked Black Ops at the same time, and I suppose who Stone went to for opinion, but I'm not sure whether it was attributed to one specific person or whether, like you say, he's an amalgamation of different things. Yeah. Either way, it's a great scene.
I have to say, I've always misread this scene because he's kind of basically saying, well, who benefits from all this, and he's kind of saying it's the top guy. It's the top guy. And for some reason, I always had, and basically they're saying it's LBJ maybe involved. But for some reason, when I watched this scene the first few times, I always thought they were talking about Nixon and his long game to become president. That's what I thought.
You hear that it was quite well known that LBJ was a little bit more of a warmonger than Kennedy would ever be.
Yeah.
And I think that at some point the inference is that LBJ saw that he could become president without having to go through an election, just by touting around his support for the military-industrial complex.
All right.
There are some reasonably damning examples of instant policy change by LBJ after Kennedy's death over Vietnam. I mean, Kennedy was ready to start withdrawing troops before he was assassinated, and LBJ instantly upped their involvement. So that if you believe the conspiracy theories, that could support it, but it could just be that was his opinion, and that's what he thought was necessary. I mean, the Vietnam's a whole other discussion, but that was a complete fiasco, and the way they poured money and bodies into that war was ridiculous. And it's hard not to think that it was about the money and the financial aspect of it, because nothing else makes any sense.
Yeah, it kind of I was just saying, I misread it. I thought they were hinting at Nixon. But
Nixon was just as bad. Nixon spoke about Vietnam like Kennedy did, but in private, and quite a lot of his conversations were taped, so you can actually hear him saying it. He was all for keeping troops over there and spending more money on the war and escalating if necessary. Yeah. So he talked a good game in public, but in private with the military guys, he was all for it.
Yeah. And then the film, after all that, any final thoughts on the Donald Sutherland scene? Becky?
Not really. I think I've kind of covered everything with the X-Files tie-ins and that.
Yeah. It's a sort of, I have to say, when the scene's over, it's kind of, you feel a bit like, oh man, I've been through the ringer here, as a viewer. In a good way. It's a really kind of enthralling scene. But
still, I think he went a step too far with the Costner walking around the monuments and the black kid and his dad stopping in front of the lit fountain, and all that was just a little bit too sort of. Oh, come on, Jim, you can make it through this. There's still good in America. It's a little bit sort of, I mean, a lot of Americans can't get away from the schmaltz factor. And I think that was a little bit of, maybe I've just hit you with too much truth. So we'll have a little bit of a moment of, it's all going to be all right. Don't worry.
Maybe Steven Spielberg turned up for a day and Stone said, yeah, you do this bit. It's fine.
Possibly.
And then they arrest Clayton Shaw for involvement in the murder of Kennedy. It's almost like a civil case, isn't it? I think. But then
even Garrison says he knew they had no chance when they brought that to trial, but it was just about the actual exercise of bringing it out into the court of public opinion.
Yeah, he's a big favourite in favour of that, isn't he? Then we get a thing of Martin Luther King getting shot, and we see his little girl take a call about a beauty contest, and kind of quite a sinister call. I don't know if that actually happened. It did.
All their staff and families had intimidation and sort of calls like that, and felt that they were being watched, and there was all sorts of shady shit going on, and all the sort of media smear campaign about how they were conducting the investigation. All of that is true.
Yeah,
all of that happened.
Considering that Stone didn't actually put that much of that in the film, did he? It was only really the bit we've just talked about, and the bit where Rooker gets sort of cornered and sort of suggested. Oh, and there's also a scene where they kind of setting up Garrison in a bathroom with a bloke, but he kind of senses something's up and leaves before anything it can escalate. There's also
the cop when he realises that Bill Broussard's turned.
Yeah, it's all that kind of stuff. There's an interesting aside right in the middle of this commentary here where Stone actually says, yeah, well, the bad guys are in charge now. When people get too scared, the bad guys take over. Now they're in charge. But this was making me laugh because I was thinking, well, that's kind of pertinent now. But he probably recorded this where George W. Bush was in charge.
Would have been Clinton.
It could have been.
It would have been Clinton when
really?
He made this.
Why would he say that about Clinton? I wouldn't have. Okay. So there's
Maybe he has a thing about getting blowies in the Oval Office. I don't know.
something about that. Then we have the scene.
I'm resurrecting the word blowy, by the way.
Right, blowy. It's a bit Aussie.
How very 90s of you.
Thank you.
Seems appropriate for the film, right? So then we have the scene where Michael Rooker's character, whose name I can't remember, and Garrison start talking about who's involved, and Rooker saying, "I cannot believe all these, the vice president could be involved in this. Maybe it's the mob and all this." And Garrison says, "What? When did the mob ever hit anyone with anything other than 38s?" And then Rooker just leaves, doesn't he? So they kind of sort of say, "Nah, I never trusted him," and all this and all this stuff. And Garrison won't have any bad words said about him, will he? Really?
That's before the airport scene.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Stone kind of likened the whole story, this whole story, to the Hemingway story, The Old Man and the Sea. Where the old guy goes out and gets a big fish. And manages to get it home, but in the journey bringing it home, all the other fish start attacking it. So when it gets home, there's barely anything left. He kind of feels that that's what's happened with the, because everyone's taken a bite out of the evidence. Evidence has been lost, and there's all this, that, and the other. There's not much left by the time you actually get it into port, kind of thing. Which interesting analogy, really. So, yeah, then we get the bathroom incident now, right? Garrison relates this particular incident in his book. So it did happen. And apparently Stone says a similar setup was used against with an advisor to LBJ they wanted to get removed. And his reputation was completely wrecked because he got kind of accused of getting up to shenanigans in the bathroom with another man. So how about that? Then we get the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, and Garrison tells his missus. Is this the point you were talking about earlier, where the missus kind of changes when she's Bobby Kennedy? Maybe she liked Bobby Kennedy more than JFK, right? Probably that.
It's obviously it takes two assassinations for his missus to believe anything he says.
Well, 3 with Martin Luther King as well.
Well, yeah, yeah.
But that scene here, I do think, again, in terms of the script writing and her character, because she doesn't get that much airtime, and again, her character isn't as explored. She goes along with everything he wants up to a certain point, but I think that's very much her sensibility, like I said, and holding on to that.
She is from the sort of first time that he sits down and spends all night going through evidence. She thinks he shouldn't be prioritizing his investigation over his idyllic family life, and that's kind of the standpoint she takes all the way through until Bobby Kennedy gets killed.
But I think what she says here is very telling, because her response is his poor mother, something like that. She's lost both her sons. And it's that human element that it keeps coming back to. It's not this conspiracy. It's not this mystery, paranoia, the government, all these massive, enterprises. It's coming down to the fact that, people have lost their lives here. And she's looking at it from that element. And I think that brings them back together.
Oh, that just bugged me even more. Well, I mean, I think the character her character for me is just kind of missing the enormity of the event and concentrating on. I think it's quite. I suppose she's quite an old-fashioned character in the film, and maybe the sort of home. The domestic sphere is more important to her than politics and what's going on in the outside world. But
definitely,
it still kind of bugs me.
I think that's the thing. It is her world, and that's all she knows, and she wants it to be their family unit, and that's it. And because he's looking at the bigger picture, that's taken away from that innocence, and it's breaking it down. She can't come to terms with, I don't think, this horrible wider world seeping in, coming into the house through, phone calls that their children are taking and things like that. But at the end, I think in the courtroom, when she gets emotional, she sees the impact it's having, and what he's trying to do, and it's a really nice turnaround, I think.
Oh, she turned up late to that as well.
With the kids
I'm
as well.
I know, the children watching that.
I'm like, Jesus, love, if you're going to support him, at least be there on time.
I'm a little more sympathetic to her. I mean, it's like, imagine being married to Ahab. That's kind of what it starts to become, right?
Oh, I don't think he's that over the top obsessive. I mean, he's just a hard worker.
Yeah, maybe, but it does feel a bit like, well, mate.
And I can totally understand his point of view of not understanding why she isn't understanding the enormity of what's happened and what it means and what sort of country it means their kids are going to be growing up in. She doesn't seem to know or want to know about that, which it does support the whole, like Becky just said, that she has different principles and different ways of judging her life and successes and failures and things like that. But it still annoys me. It still rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I have a feeling also in real life. I mean, they didn't present this in the film as much, but in real life, if you start getting death threats, that would affect things quite significantly. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, she had 5 kids. She could afford to lose one.
All right, fair enough. Okay. While we're on it, I mean, you're talking about she particularly annoys you. Becky, is there anything in this film or about this film that particularly annoys you?
I can understand how they would put all of the female characters into one. I can understand that in terms of maybe, roles that they had at that time. They wouldn't have been as, in terms of the hierarchy of the office, they wouldn't have had much of a role. But it's a bit annoying that even with, Sissy Spacek's character, that that's her character, like we were talking about. She has her own principles. She's focused on the family and that. But there's just no really... I don't know, the women in it aren't portrayed in a great way. And if we're coming back to the X-Files, I think that's where the X-Files really excelled and took off.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, Scully. Wow, Scully.
Exactly. And I know this is based on historical facts and, looking at actual roles that women may have played and such. But again, in the time, you're looking at the 1960s and that outlook and such. But you have the fact that things were changing. Free love and all sorts. A lot of big things were happening, and it's a shame that isn't really represented.
Yeah, I think
I do like that the character of Susie's the first one to swear in the film. And then Jim Garrison tells her to mind her language, which is hilarious.
I think I remember the commentary. Stone actually says none of the team, there was no women that were qualified in that sort of location or area or whatever to the same level as the men, so it was just like interns and sort of more junior members of staff with the women. But he wanted to present, show that women were involved in it in some way. So Laurie Metcalf was the composite character.
They were there to type letters and get the coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
And stuff,
well, yeah, they were.
Welcome to the Sexist Podcast.
There is one.
Those are the good old days, we call them. The good old days podcast.
Yeah, happy days. There is one particular scene that always gets me go, but in a kind of laughing way. There's one scene where I can't remember the specifics, but it's like there's one bit where Jim Garrison's going, "Oh yeah, this guy got this note and he read it and he tore it up." He says, "Why would he tear that up?" I'll tell you why. Because it had details of JFK's murder on it. And it's like, mate, I get notes all the time and I always tear them up before I put them in the bin. They don't all involve JFK's murder. I don't know where you got that sort of leap of logic from.
I've only ever had one note about JFK's murder.
Yeah. Yeah, did you tear it up? Well, anyway.
No, I didn't. I burnt it.
There you go. It was
safer that way.
That was the bit where my eyes kind of rolled. I was like, oh, for goodness sake, let's dial it back a bit, So, so we then get some of the court case kicked off. We get Bacon on the stand. He's kind of fun. But then we get a completely mental witness who goes on about the fact that he sent his daughter to university and he fingerprinted her to make sure she was the same person when she came back, which made me laugh.
Yeah.
I've done that. What's wrong with that? Yeah, and Stone actually said in the commentary track, it made me laugh. It gave me a giggle. He says, "I think that witness may have been a plant." To make Garrison's case look weak. It's like, yeah, really? But then we get something much more serious. We get the film, right? We get the film, which is, yeah, I mean, the film to me always looks like an obvious, yeah, that shot is not coming from the angle you said it's coming from at all. And we get the
back to the left.
Well, his kids are sitting there and watching
thing,
it.
Isn't it?
Yeah, his kids are there. It's like, oh man. And then we, yeah, and there's also all this other bullet stuff, the stray bullets firing this way and that, and all this.
I think his son would have been okay with that because he talks very slowly. That child actor did.
That child is Oliver Stone's son. Did you know?
Is
that?
it really?
Yeah.
No way. Was he dropped on the head as a baby or something?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
Oh no, Daddy! It's painful.
Yeah, it was Oliver Stone. Well, that's how he got the job. So he got the job.
To his sparkling dialogue delivery.
Yeah. So there's all this stuff about bullets zigzagging there and there. I think the whole back and to the left thing's very effective, actually. It's very impactful. So then we get the speech, right? Stone actually said that Costner, as you say, he learnt it and could do it in one take, but he could do it again and again if he wanted to. He was saying
it's freaky, isn't it? Can you imagine having to learn that much? I mean, it must have been pages.
Yeah, but people learn Shakespeare and do it on stage every night, don't they? So I guess movie actors aren't that honed.
They have the benefit of doing it every night, though.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. Delivery is really good, and it really builds. It really builds. It is a good turn, and it's probably the one scene I always think of when I think of Costner in this film. It's probably this one. It's this one and the very first one where he's in the bar and kind of when we hear Kennedy dies. It's those two always kind of spring to mind. But yeah, pretty good. And then the verdict comes in that Clayshaw's not guilty. Right, I guess, what should we talk about now? I mean, that's kind of the film we could sum up, but wouldn't mind kind of talking about what things do you think were real indicators it wasn't just Oswald? Do you think, Becky, do you think it was just Oswald, or do you think it was a conspiracy?
It definitely wasn't just Oswald, no.
Okay, and Paul?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I was always of the mind of, I reckon it probably was. And the reason for that is really simple. I've never really been that... I have seen this film before, obviously, but most recently my sort of contact with JFK was reading Stephen King's 22/11/63, and I read quite a bit about King's views on the whole shooting. And basically, Stephen King said, no, I really think it just comes down to a lone gunman. There's no other evidence for anything else. And so I was like, well, if Stephen King thinks that, I think that. But having thought about it a bit more, yeah, I'm kind of the view there's too many things that kind of indicate several people were involved. There's, Oswald sitting on a different floor. The way Oswald acted as if he really wasn't guilty was way too cool. The whole mad bullet stuff. And all of those.
The fact that the thing about his arrest as well. I mean, he'd apparently just shot a cop, and he goes to the cinema, and he doesn't pay for his ticket. And when the guy phones the cops to say someone's gone to the cinema, apparently in those days you'd phone the police if somebody didn't buy a ticket for the cinema, and about 10 squad cars full of cops turn up.
Yeah, that is shady. Right.
So there's so many things like that happened on the day that just make me... And the fact that I've seen modern recreations with world-class shooters trying to recreate the shots. And they say that in the time and all the rest of it, that it's just not possible, not with the equipment that he had, even if he had been a world-class shot.
Yeah, I mean, there's also stuff like so many witnesses saying they saw something on the grassy knoll and the fence. The whole lack
the
of
one bullet that leaves 8 holes in 2 people and passes through several bones and ends up pristine on the trolley in the hospital.
And wasn't there a bloke like a quarter of a mile away who was just standing somewhere and a bullet wanged past his head?
He got nicked by a fragment.
He got nicked, right?
So, and he got nicked by a fragment. He was stood almost under the underpass.
Yeah, that's right. There's also other shady stuff, the terrible security planning, the fact the post-mortem was done in such a rush, no details about Lee Harvey Oswald's questioning for the first 12 hours really forthcoming, stuff like that. That just looks like properly shady. There's one thing that always bothered me that I can never forget. I've talked this over with my missus, who says, no, that's that, and she's explained why she thinks it's a perfectly normal reaction. It's the fact that Jackie Kennedy seems to climb out the car backwards, out the back of the car, rather than ducking down. I could never quite understand what she was doing there, but I guess if your husband's just been shot through the head, you want to get out the car? I don't know. Just looks weird to me.
If he's been shot from the front, that's the direction you'd be running.
That's true. Yeah, it just looks weird to me.
But I mean, even I think, oh God, I'm having a blank on the senator in the front of the car.
I can't remember his name either.
Well, he's heard to shout by several witnesses, "Oh my God, they're going to kill us all," and I mean, just that alone says to me that. It just sounds dodgy, doesn't it? That's not something you say, even if, I mean, it's just not. It's a very weird thing to say when bullets suddenly start flying.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't sound that weird.
I heard and I always thought that she was trying to get a piece of, like, his head, brain matter, or whatever.
His ear popped off when he was shot.
It would just be a natural reaction in the shock and everything that she would grab, go to grab that.
Yeah. There's also, I hate to talk about something else, but I was watching, as I said, I was watching The Crown, and there's a shot of Jackie Kennedy 12 hours after the shooting where she emerges from the hospital and she's still wearing the same clothes and covered in some of the blood. And I didn't realise that had happened to her. That seems...
And she was then loaded onto a plane full of politicians, and LBJ was sworn in with her stood next to him.
That's so weird. That sounds so weird, doesn't it?
I know.
I think I read that she didn't want to change because she wanted that to be, kind of documented. Yeah. Which is, if that's her own admission, then that was a bloody strong thing to do, I think.
Yeah. In fact, as I say, in the TV show The Crown, the Queen says that's deliberate. She's not changed for a deliberate reason, but they don't say any more than that because it's kind
of. That's great
weird.
For her kids to see her in a dress with bits of Dad all over it.
Well, I mean, if that's her way of, fighting back in one sense, then I can kind of understand that as well.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, let's sum up our thoughts on the film. So, Paul, would you like to go first?
I think this is it's one of my favourite films, so obviously I'm going to be pretty glowing. I think it's got one of the best ensemble casts that there's been in a film. The quality of acting and actors in it is great. I think it's really well written and just well put together. The intercutting of real footage, recreated footage, and new stuff that's been filmed on different stock. All of that stuff just adds to the atmosphere and sells the sort of realism of it. And I think it's just one of those films that you'll end up. It just gets you interested in what happened, and whether you go with the film or not, or you believe some of it or a little bit of it, or you just think it raises more questions than it answers. A film that has that sort of effect on an audience is a good thing in my mind.
Becky, what are your thoughts?
I think that the film has so much to tackle, and the way that it does, I mean, there's so many decisions in terms of what you include, what you don't include, that perfectly complement Stone's approach, between kind of, it's not a a faithful retelling of history and such. It's different theories, and I think it's a play in terms of commenting on reality itself. And how, as a nation and individuals, people respond to a certain event, conspiracy itself, and the establishment. There's so much going on there, and I think the decisions that he made it's very delicately balanced in terms of all the different elements, and like I say, I've come to this a lot later than both of you, and I really enjoyed it. And it's one I really want to watch again a few times, because I think I will pick up on a lot more.
It definitely bears rewatch, this film, absolutely. I don't think it's one you'll ever get bored with, though it's quite a lot to take in, so it's something to space out. I watched it probably a month gap. I watched it twice with a month gap, and which felt about right for a rewatch, because I picked up a few things that I missed last time and so on and so forth. But completely enthralled. It's pretty interesting with the commentary track on too, actually. Right, so my thoughts are I thought this was it's a real tour de force, actually. You could definitely feel Oliver Stone's convictions really bubbling through what's going on here, but the writing's pretty solid. I mean, obviously there's a lot of speculation mixed up in the facts. There's false constructs even, but I did feel that it was trying to make a point about and what the truth actually was. Sometimes you have to, fiction is a lie that shows you the truth, right? And that's kind of what's going on here. It's a very mesmerising film. It's like there's definitely bits of it where you just could not tear your eyes away. Certainly the scene with Donald Sutherland, say, but there were some excellent scenes throughout. Kevin Bacon's scene, wherever Gary Oldman popped up, he was kind of awesome. I really like the music and the changing of the music in this as well. But it's a real epic in the sense of it's not like a big scope thing like Spartacus or something, but it's epic in terms of an ideas. It's got an epic amount of ideas going on in here. I often I think one of the notes I wrote when I watched this recently was Stone must have been coked up or angry or both when he made this. That's kind of the feel to it. But no, there's too much skill in this to just say it's a coked up kind of bit of filmmaking. But yeah, this is a solid film, and definitely informed the X-Files. Bringing it back to the X-Files, definitely informed the X-Files. So yeah. So any last thoughts for anyone?
Just to add that one word I'd use to describe the film will be provocative. I think that no matter what you believe, it really opens questions and dialogues and discussions, and I think that's a really good thing. And the other thing would be, coming back to the X-Files, I wasn't aware until I was doing a bit of a Google search that...
I'm sorry, I'm so childish.
That there's actually, I think, a comic book, part of the X-Files most recent comic book series called, JFK Disclosure.
Oh, right.
And it's bringing it all together. I think it was meant to be tied into the release of the classified documents in the end of last year.
Oh, okay. I mean, there is an episode of the X-Files where the cigarette smoking man is at the rifle of JFK. I think it might have been Martin Luther King.
Yeah, he shoots him from a drain.
Yeah.
On the ground.
Wow. I didn't remember that. I didn't remember that. I remember him shooting someone from like an apartment. He does. Well, the cigarette smoking man has a few sniper moments. Oh, does he do Bobby as well?
And he also gets sniped himself at one point. But the JFK one where that's a great episode because he's basically the shadowy dude behind everything moody that happens in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he shoots JFK from a sort of a drain runoff, a culvert cover from the side of the road. As he goes past, he just shoots him in the head as he drives past.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so this is a great film, so go watch it, right? Go watch it. So, next time on the X-Files, we're going to be doing some X-Files for a change, right? But when we come back to the films, I think we're going to cover what I consider probably the third most important film in terms of forming the X-Files, which is All the President's Men. There's definitely some X-Files elements in that. If nothing else, we've got Deep Throat in it, right? So, bye from me.
Bye from me.
Bye.
So, I've got to say thanks for coming on again, Paul, putting up with us.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
And remember, they're watching.